Commander Caliph Vio had never known defeat, and he was certain that today would not change that truth. He stood in the center of the preparation chamber, his massive form casting shadows across the polished metal floor as servants moved around him with quiet efficiency. They attached the final pieces of his powered armor with reverent hands, each blade clicking into place with a soft hum of energy. The armor was a masterpiece of Dravani engineering, worth more than entire human colony ships, and it had carried him through 400 victories without a single scratch. His crystalline exoskeleton, hidden beneath all that metal and circuitry, vibrated with anticipation. Today he would face a human, and the thought made him want to laugh. The Dravani Empire had conquered 12 species across the galaxy, and each one had been stronger than these soft pink creatures from Earth. Humans were a joke among the spacefaring races, a species that had somehow stumbled into the stars. Despite having bodies that seemed designed to break, their bones were fragile, their skin tore easily, and they could not survive in temperatures that Dravani children played in without concern. Yet here they were, demanding rights to the Kepler corridor as if they had earned a place at the table of true civilizations. The Galactic Council had ordered a champion duel to settle the dispute. As was tradition, when two species could not agree on territorial matters, Caliph had volunteered immediately, seeing this as an opportunity to remind the galaxy why the Dravani Empire commanded respect and fear in equal measure. His advisor, a thin Dravani named Sorel, entered the chamber with a data tablet clutched in his four-fingered hands. "Commander," Sorel said, his voice carrying the raspy quality of their species, "I have information about the human champion." Caliph turned his head slightly, the servos in his neck armor whirring with the movement. "Tell me their name so I know what to carve on the memorial stone." "Her name is Elena Vasquez," Sorel said, and there was something strange in his voice that Caliph could not identify. "She is a xenobiologist, Commander, not a warrior." For a long moment, Caliph said nothing, and then he began to laugh. The sound echoed through the chamber, deep and booming, and even the servants paused in their work to listen. "A scientist?" Caliph managed to say between bursts of laughter. "They sent a scientist to face me in combat? Have the humans lost their minds, or do they simply wish to surrender with extra steps?" Sorel shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clearly uncomfortable with something. "There is more, Commander, and I think you should hear it before you dismiss her entirely." "What more could there possibly be?" Caliph asked, still chuckling as a servant polished the surface of his chestplate. "She has requested to study the specifications of your armor before the duel," Sorel said. "She claims it is her right under council rules to understand what she faces." This time, Caliph laughed so hard that his translator unit glitched and produced a series of strange clicking sounds. "Let her study all she wants," he said when he finally regained his composure. "Let her see every detail of the weapon that will destroy her, and let her understand just how hopeless her situation truly is." Meanwhile, on the other side of Thyra Station, Elena Vasquez sat alone in a small room that the council had provided for visiting champions. The room was bare and cold, designed for species that did not need comfort. But Elena did not seem to notice. She was too focused on the holographic display floating in front of her, showing rotating images of Dravani-powered armor from every angle at 53 years old. Elena did not look like a warrior. She stood only 5 feet and 4 inches tall, with graying hair pulled back in a practical bun and lines around her eyes that spoke of decades spent squinting at research data. Her hands were calloused from years of fieldwork on alien worlds, and there was a thin scar on her left forearm from an incident with a specimen that had not appreciated being studied. But her eyes were sharp, sharper than any blade, and they moved across the armor schematics with the intensity of a predator tracking prey. She had spent 30 years studying alien biology, learning how different species thought and moved and survived. The Dravani were fascinating to her. With their crystalline nervous systems and their strange relationship with technology, their powered armor was not just equipment. It was an extension of their bodies, connected directly to their bioelectric fields through neural interfaces. When a Dravani wore their armor, they did not control it so much as become one with it. This connection was their greatest strength. And Elena had noticed something interesting about it. The neural interface required a point of maximum conductivity, a spot where the armor shielding was deliberately thinned to allow signals to pass freely between body and machine. Most species would never think to exploit such a thing because they thought of armor as protection and nothing more. But Elena was a scientist, and scientists looked at systems and asked questions that others never considered. A chime sounded at her door, and she waved her hand to allow entry. A council attendant stepped inside. A small creature with blue skin and too many eyes. Dr. Vasquez, the attendant said in a high voice. The other delegates wish to speak with you before the duel, and they have asked me to bring you to them. Elena saved her research and stood up slowly, taking a moment to stretch muscles that had grown stiff from sitting. Lead the way, she said simply. The attendant guided her through the winding corridors of Thyra Station, past viewports that showed the endless black of space dotted with distant stars. Other aliens walked these halls, representatives from dozens of species, and Elena felt their eyes on her as she passed. She heard whispers in languages her translator could not quite catch, but she understood the tone well enough. They were laughing at her. Just as Keleth had laughed, they saw a small human woman with no armor and no weapons, walking to what they assumed was her death. Elena did not react to their mockery. She simply walked with her head held high and her expression calm. The council chamber was a vast circular room with rising seats arranged in tiers around a central platform. Dozens of alien delegates sat in those seats, watching as Elena entered and took her place on the platform. Keleth was already there, his armored form towering over everything else in the room. He looked down at her with what she assumed was contempt, though it was hard to read expressions on a face made of crystal and metal. So this is the human champion, said a voice from the upper tiers, belonging to a delegate from a species Elena did not recognize. I expected something more impressive. We all did, another delegate called out, and laughter rippled through the chamber. Elena stood in the center of all that mockery and said nothing. She looked up at Keleth, studied the way his armor caught the light, noted the slight pulse of energy around the neural interface port on his chest. Then she smiled, and something about that smile made the laughter die away just a little bit. Is something amusing to you, human? Keleth asked, his voice booming through the chamber's speakers. I was just thinking, Elena said in a voice that carried clearly despite its softness, that your armor really is beautiful work, and I'm looking forward to seeing how it performs. Keleth stared at her for a long moment, trying to find the fear that should have been there. He found nothing but patience and quiet certainty. For the first time in 400 duels, something cold touched the edge of his confidence, but he pushed the feeling aside because she was just a human, and humans were weak. Tomorrow would prove that once and for all. The night before the duel, Keleth stood in his private quarters and reviewed everything the Dravani Empire knew about humans. The data files were extensive, filled with biological measurements and psychological profiles and historical records dating back to when humans had first stumbled into the galactic community, scrolled through statistics that confirmed what every spacefaring species already believed. Humans had an average lifespan of only 80 years, barely a fraction of what most civilized races enjoyed. Their bodies could not regenerate damaged tissue with any useful speed, and even minor injuries could take weeks or months to heal. They required a very specific range of temperatures to survive, and their tolerance for radiation was laughably poor. Their bones while adequate for the light gravity of Earth, broke easily under conditions that other species considered normal there. Muscles were small and weak, compared to nearly every other intelligent race in the known galaxy on paper. Humans should have gone extinct long before they ever reached the stars, and yet they had not only survived, but spread across 40 star systems in just 2 centuries. This fact puzzled the Dravani scientists who had compiled these reports, and Keleth could see their confusion in the notes they had left in the margins. How did such a fragile species accomplish so much in so little time? The reports offered theories about luck and favorable circumstances, but none of them felt satisfying. Keleth pushed the question aside because it did not matter. Tomorrow, he would crush their champion and take the Kepler corridor for the Empire. And then humans would learn their proper place in the galactic order. He turned his attention to the duel terms that the Council had approved. The rules were simple, as they always were for champion duels. The fight would continue until one participant drew first blood or incapacitated their opponent. Killing was allowed but not required, and most duels ended with surrender long before death became necessary. Keleth had never needed to kill an opponent because his armor made incapacitation so easy. One punch could shatter bones, one grab could crush limbs, and his neural-linked combat suite processed threats faster than organic thought could manage. The human woman had made an interesting request. During the rules negotiation, she had asked that neither champion be allowed to carry weapons, only what they brought with them naturally. At first, Keleth had been confused by this, because his armor was the most dangerous weapon on the station. But then he had realized what she meant, and the realization had made him laugh again. She wanted to face him with nothing but her bare hands, and she wanted him to do the same, of course. His version of bare hands included powered armor that could withstand starship-grade weaponry. The woman was clearly insane. Or perhaps she simply wanted to die with some twisted sense of honor intact. Either way, Keleth had agreed to her terms without hesitation. He dismissed the data files and began his pre-battle meditation, calming his crystalline nervous system and preparing his body for the neural sync with his armor. Tomorrow would be a good day. Across the station, Elena sat cross-legged on the floor of her small room with her eyes closed and her breathing slow and steady. She was not meditating in the traditional sense, but rather running through calculations in her head. The armor specifications she had studied told her everything she needed to know about the neural interface and how it connected to the Dravani nervous system. The connection worked through bioelectric signals, tiny pulses of electricity that carried commands from brain to armor and feedback from armor to brain. This was the key to the armor's incredible responsiveness. The reason the Dravani-empowered armor could move as naturally as if the metal plates were their own skin, but it was also a vulnerability, one that the Dravani had never considered because they had never faced an enemy who thought to exploit it. Elena opened her eyes and looked down at her hands. They were ordinary human hands, soft and small and apparently useless in a fight against powered armor. But these hands had a secret that the Dravani databases had never recorded. Humans were bioelectric beings. Just like the Dravani themselves, every thought, every heartbeat, every nerve impulse was carried by tiny electrical signals. Most humans never thought about this electricity running through their bodies because it was just part of how they worked. But some humans had learned to do more than just ignore it. Elena was one of those humans. She had spent 15 years training with a group of medical specialists who had developed techniques for channeling and focusing bioelectric energy. The original purpose had been medical, a way to restart stopped hearts and reset damaged neural pathways without needing equipment. Field medics in remote areas could save lives with nothing but their hands and their training. But Elena had seen other Possibilities in the technique. Possibilities that her teachers had never considered. She stood up and moved to the center of the room, settling into a stance that her body remembered from decades of practice. Her feet spread to shoulder width, her knees slightly bent, her hands raised with fingers relaxed but ready. She focused on her breathing, drawing air deep into her lungs and releasing it slowly. With each breath, she felt the electricity in her body more clearly, a tingling warmth that started in her chest and spread outward through her arms. She could not generate lightning like some fantasy character. That was not how the technique worked, but she could focus the natural bioelectric energy of her body into a single point, a concentrated pulse that could interfere with other electrical systems against another human. The technique could cause muscle spasms or temporary paralysis against a Giovanni neural interface. It could do something much more interesting. Elena practiced for an hour, running through the movements until her body ached and sweat dripped from her forehead. When she was satisfied, she sat down on the edge of her bed and picked up her communication device. She needed to make a call before the duel, one that might be her last. The signal took several minutes to reach Earth, bouncing through relay stations across the vast distances of space. Finally, a face appeared on the small screen. A young woman with dark hair and eyes that looked exactly like Elena's own mom. The young woman said, surprise clear in her voice, "I thought you would be preparing for tomorrow. Is everything okay?" "Everything is fine, Maria," Elena said, and her voice was warm, despite the tension she felt inside. "I just wanted to talk to you before the duel." Maria's expression shifted to worry, and Elena could see that her daughter understood more than she was saying. "Mom, are you sure about this? The news feeds are saying that the Giovanni champion has never lost, and he has this incredible armor. And you're just going in there with nothing." "Not nothing," Elena said with a small smile. "I am going in there with 30 years of knowledge and 15 years of training and a lifetime of being underestimated." "That is not exactly reassuring," Maria said. "It should be," Elena replied, "because being underestimated is the most powerful advantage a human can have. And tomorrow I am going to show the entire galaxy why." She talked with her daughter for another 20 minutes, sharing memories and laughter and love. When the call ended, Elena put down the device and lay back on the bed. She stared at the ceiling and thought about everything she had learned in her long career. The Giovanni were powerful, but power made beings careless. They looked at humans and saw weakness because they measured strength in muscle mass and armor, thickness and raw physical force. They never asked why weak creatures survived in a universe that should have destroyed them tomorrow. Elena would teach them the answer. She closed her eyes and slept deeply, dreaming of nothing at all. The arena on Vira Station could hold 10,000 spectators, and every seat was filled. Aliens of every shape and color and size had come to watch the champion duel. Drawn by the promise of entertainment and the political weight of what was at stake, the Kepler corridor was one of the most valuable trade routes in the galaxy, and whoever controlled it would have enormous power over commerce and travel. The Giovanni Empire had claimed the corridor as their own, but humanity had pushed back with surprising stubbornness. Now, the dispute would be settled the old way, with blood and strength and the judgment of combat in the luxury boxes above the common seats. Diplomats and warlords watched with calculating eyes. They were not here just for entertainment. They were here to measure humanity's worth. If the human champion won, it would change everything the galaxy believed about the species from Earth. If she lost, humanity would be diminished in the eyes of all civilized races. Reduced to a footnote in galactic history, the arena floor was a circle of smooth metal 50 meters across, with no obstacles or hiding places. Massive screens floated above the crowd, ready to broadcast every detail of the fight to spectators and to viewers across 1,000 worlds. Energy barriers shimmered at the edge of the arena, protecting the audience from stray violence while allowing them to see everything that happened. A deep horn sounded through the station, signaling that the duel was about to begin. The crowd grew quiet. Thousands of alien beings leaning forward in their seats with anticipation. Then the gates on the far side of the arena opened, and HFY stepped into the light. He was magnificent in his powered armor, a walking fortress of metal and energy that seemed to absorb the arena lights and throw them back as something darker. Each step made the floor tremble slightly, and the hum of his suit's power core could be heard even over the murmur of the crowd. His helmet was shaped like a predator's skull, with glowing blue eyes that swept across the arena as if searching for prey. The crowd roared with approval. Thousands of voices raised in admiration and bloodlust. Keyleth raised one armored fist in acknowledgement, and the roar grew even louder. He was the favorite, the undefeated champion, the pride of the Dravani Empire. Everyone knew how this fight would end. Then the gates on the opposite side of the arena opened, and silence fell like a physical weight. Elena Vasquez walked onto the arena floor with measured steps, her head held high and her expression calm. She wore a simple combat suit, the standard issue given to human soldiers for basic protection against environmental hazards. It was not armor in any meaningful sense, just a thin layer of fabric that would not stop even the weakest blow from Keyleth's fists. She carried no weapons, no tools, nothing that could possibly threaten a being wrapped in military-grade powered armor. Silence stretched for one long moment, and then the laughter began. It started in the lower seats and spread upward like a wave. Thousands of aliens laughing at the absurd sight before them. This was the human champion? This small, soft creature with her gray hair and her ordinary hands? Some spectators wondered if this was some kind of joke, a deliberate insult meant to mock the entire tradition of champion duels. Others assumed the humans had simply given up and sent someone to lose with a minimum of fuss. Elena walked to the center of the arena and stopped, her eyes fixed on Keyleth as he approached from the other side. She did not react to the laughter, did not show any sign that she heard it at all. Her focus was complete, absolute, and utterly unshakable. Keyleth stopped 5 meters away from her, his armored form towering over her like a mountain of metal. The size difference was almost comic. A child standing before a giant, and the laughter in the crowd grew even louder. This? Keyleth's voice boomed through the arena speakers, amplified by his suit's systems until it echoed off the distant walls. This is Earth's champion? This soft thing? This weak, fragile, pathetic excuse for a warrior? He spread his arms wide, inviting the crowd to share in his disbelief. Look at her. Her bones are hollow compared to ours. Her muscles are tiny strands of nothing. One blow and she will shatter like glass. The crowd roared its agreement, stamping feet and pounding seats in a rhythm of anticipation. They wanted blood, and they were certain they would see it soon. Elena waited until the noise died down, then spoke in a voice that was somehow clear despite being so much quieter than Keyleth's amplified thunder. Your armor, she said, her tone almost conversational. It really is beautiful work. And I mean that sincerely. Keyleth tilted his massive head, uncertain how to respond to this strange comment. I have studied the specifications, Elena continued, and the engineering is remarkable. Truly the best I have ever seen. She took a step closer, her eyes moving across the surface of his armor as if she could see through the metal to the systems beneath, neurally integrated. Yes, the interface connects directly to your bioelectric field, which allows the armor to respond to your thoughts as quickly as your own body would. It is bonded to my very soul, Keyleth said, a note of pride entering his voice despite his confusion. It cannot be removed. It cannot be disabled. It cannot be overcome by any force in the galaxy. He leaned down until his helmet was close to Elena's face, his glowing eyes filling her vision. When you face me, Human, you face not just a warrior, but the pinnacle of Dravani engineering. The culmination of 10,000 years of technological advancement. Elena did not step back from his looming presence. Did not show any sign of fear or intimidation. Instead, she smiled. And something about that smile made the crowd grow quiet again. Good, she said softly. I was hoping you would say that. The council referee, a tall being with silver skin and 4 arms, stepped forward and raised all 4 hands for attention. Champions! The referee called out in a voice designed to carry across vast distances. The terms of this duel have been agreed upon by both parties. The fight will continue until first blood is drawn or until one champion is incapacitated. No weapons are permitted, only what each champion brings with them naturally. Do both champions understand and accept these terms? I accept, Callus said immediately. His voice full of confidence. I accept, Elena said, and her voice was just as confident. Though much quieter, the referee stepped back to the edge of the arena, putting distance between himself and the coming violence. Champions, take your positions. Callus settled into a combat stance, his armored feet spreading for balance and his fists rising to guard position. Every movement was perfect, programmed by combat protocols and enhanced by neural acceleration. He was ready to end this farce and claim his victory. Elena simply stood where she was. Her body relaxed and her hands at her sides. She looked almost peaceful, like someone waiting for a friend rather than preparing for a fight to the death. The crowd leaned forward, eager for the carnage to begin. The referee raised one hand high above his head. Let the duel begin. The hand dropped and the arena exploded with the sound of Callith's charge. Callith moved like a thunderstorm wrapped in metal, his massive form crossing the distance between them in the span of a heartbeat. The crowd barely had time to gasp before he was upon her. One armored fist swinging in an arc that could shatter stone and bend steel. This was how all his duels ended, with a single devastating blow that proved the absolute supremacy of Dravani powers. His combat protocols calculated the perfect angle of attack. His neural interface translated thought into motion faster than organic reflexes could ever match. And his strength amplifiers multiplied the force of his strike 100-fold. The punch was beautiful in its brutality, a perfect expression of overwhelming force. And there was no possible way for a soft human body to survive its impact except Elena did not try to survive. She did not block. Because blocking was impossible against such strength, she did not retreat. Because there was no time to escape and nowhere to run instead. She did something that Callith's combat protocols had never been programmed to anticipate. She stepped forward, directly into the path of his attack. The movement was small but precise. A single step that carried her past the arc of his fist and inside his guard. His blow sailed past her head, missing by centimeters, and the force of his swing pulled his body slightly off balance for one frozen moment. Callith found himself looking down at a human woman who had somehow survived his fastest attack. His combat protocol screamed warnings about proximity and vulnerability. But Elena was already moving. Her hand came up, palm flat, fingers spread, and pressed against the center of his chest plate, right against the neural interface port. Callith almost laughed at the futility of the gesture, because what could one soft human hand do against armor that had withstood weapons fire? But then Elena pushed, and the laugh died in his throat. The push itself was nothing, a pressure he barely felt through layers of metal and circuitry. What came with the push was something else entirely. Elena released everything she had gathered during her years of training. All the bioelectric energy her body could produce, focused into a single concentrated pulse. 40,000 volts of electrical current flowed from her palm directly into the neural interface port, the one spot where the armor shielding was deliberately thinned to allow maximum signal conductivity. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Elites Armor was designed to amplify bioelectric commands, to take the tiny signals from his nervous system and turn them into powerful instructions for the suit's systems. Did exactly what it was built to do. It amplified, but the signal it received was not a coherent command. It was a chaotic surge of foreign electricity that his crystalline nervous system had no way to interpret. Feedback loop was instantaneous, his own neural signals mixing with Elena's attack in a cascade of contradictory instructions. The armor tried to obey 1,000 commands at once, to raise its arms and lower them, to step forward and backward, to activate shields and deactivate them. Every system went haywire, fighting against every other system in a war of confused circuits. Galeth screamed. The sound was unlike anything the crowd had ever heard from a Dravani warrior. A high shriek of agony that cut through the arena like a blade. His armor began to collapse around him, plates retracting when they should have stayed locked, joints seizing when they should have moved freely. The magnificent fortress of metal that had protected him through 400 victories crumpled like paper in a strong wind. His legs gave out first, the knee servos failing completely and dropping him to the arena floor with a crash that shook the entire platform. His arms followed, falling limp at his sides as the strength amplifiers shut down one after another. The helmet systems died with a shower of sparks, plunging his vision into darkness and cutting off the neural interface completely. He collapsed forward, his armored body hitting the metal floor with enough force to dent the surface. Behind him, around him, everywhere, the armor that had been his pride and his identity fell apart piece by piece. Plates clattered against the ground, circuits sparked and died, and the hum of the power core faded to silence. 10,000 spectators stared in absolute shock at what they had just witnessed. The mighty Dravani champion, the undefeated warrior in his invincible armor, lay twitching on the arena floor while a small human woman stood over him with her hands still extended. No one made a sound, no one moved, no one could process what had happened in those few impossible seconds. Lena lowered her hands slowly, her breathing heavy from the effort of channeling so much energy at once. Her entire body trembled with exhaustion, and she could feel her heart pounding against her ribs, like it was trying to escape. The technique she had used was never meant for combat, never designed to be pushed so far, and using it had taken everything she had. But she was still standing, and Keleth was not. The council referee approached cautiously, his silver face showing something that might have been disbelief. He looked at Keleth, who was groaning weakly as his crystalline nervous system struggled to recover from the overload. He looked at Elena, who met his gaze with steady eyes despite her obvious exhaustion. The champion Keleth Vior is incapacitated, the referee announced, his voice carrying across the silent arena. The champion Elena Vasquez is victorious. For a long moment, the silence continued. Then one voice in the crowd began to cheer. A human voice from somewhere in the lower seats. Another joined it, and another. And suddenly, the human delegation was on their feet and screaming with joy. The other species in the crowd sat in stunned silence, watching as the handful of humans in the arena celebrated what should have been impossible in the luxury boxes. Diplomats and warlords exchanged glances that held fear and calculation in equal measure. They had come to watch humanity be humbled, and instead they had witnessed something that changed everything. They thought they knew. Elena stood in the center of the arena as the cheering continued. Her eyes moving across the crowd, she saw the shock, the disbelief, the dawning realization that humans were not what everyone had assumed. She saw fear in some faces and respect in others, and she saw Keleth slowly being helped to his feet by medical attendants who had rushed onto the arena floor. His armor hung in pieces around him, useless now, and his crystalline body was exposed for all to see without his magnificent suit. He looked smaller somehow, diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. He looked up at Elena, and their eyes met across the distance. There was no hatred in his gaze. Only confusion and a question he did not know how to ask. How had she done it? How had a soft human woman with nothing but her bare hands destroyed something that weapons of war could not scratch? Elena did not answer the question because the answer was not something that could be explained in words. The answer was humanity itself. Everything that had made her species. What it was, the answer was millions of years of evolution on a planet that tried to kill them every day. The answer was adaptation and learning and the refusal to accept that any obstacle was truly insurmountable. The answer was simple. Humans were weak, and that weakness had made them strong in ways that no other species could understand. Elena turned away from Calith and walked slowly toward the arena. Her legs felt heavy, and her vision was slightly blurred. But she kept her head high and her steps steady. The humans in the crowd chanted her name, and the sound followed her like a wave. She had won, humanity had won, and the galaxy would never look at Earth the same way again. Elena stood in the center of the arena floor as the medical teams finished removing Calith from the platform. His armor lay scattered around her in pieces, a monument to arrogance that would be talked about for generations. The crowd had grown quiet again. 10,000 beings watching and waiting to see what the human champion would do next. She was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. Her body drained from the effort of channeling so much energy in a single burst. Every muscle ached, and she could feel a headache building behind her eyes that would probably last for days. But she was still standing, and that mattered more than anything else. The council referee approached her again, this time with a device that would broadcast her words to every screen and speaker in the arena. "Champion Vasquez," the referee said, his silver face still showing traces of shock. "By tradition, the victor of a champion duel may address the assembly. Do you wish to speak?" Elena took the device and looked out at the sea of alien faces surrounding her. She saw the Dravani delegates, their crystalline features frozen in expressions of disbelief and anger. She saw the representatives of a dozen other species, all of them recalculating everything they thought they knew about humanity. She saw the small group of human diplomats, their faces glowing with pride and hope and tears, and she saw Calith being helped through a distant doorway, his body supported by medical attendants. His once proud form now bent and broken. She raised the device to her lips and began to speak. "You studied our weaknesses," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite its softness. "All of you did. The Dravani and everyone else who thought they knew what humanity was." She paused, letting her words sink into the silence. "You measured our bones and found them fragile. You tested our muscles and found them small. You calculated our lifespans and found them short." She looked up at the massive screens floating above the arena, seeing her own face reflected back at her. "You saw our soft skin and our slow healing and our narrow tolerances. And you concluded that we were weak, that we were prey, that we would be easy to dismiss and easier to conquer." The silence in the arena was absolute now, every being hanging on her words. "But you never asked the most important question," Elena continued. "You never asked why we survived anyway." She turned slowly, addressing all sides of the arena in turn. "Humans evolved on a planet that was trying to kill us from the moment we appeared. We faced predators with sharper teeth and stronger muscles. We faced diseases that could wipe out entire populations. We faced ice ages and droughts and natural disasters that should have ended our species. 1,000 times over." Her voice grew stronger as she spoke, the exhaustion fading behind the fire of what she needed to say. "We had no armor, no natural weapons, no special abilities that made us superior to the threats we faced. All we had was this." She tapped the side of her head. "We had minds that learned and adapted and refused to accept that any problem was unsolvable. We looked at every obstacle and asked how we could overcome it. And we never stopped asking that question, no matter how impossible the odds seemed. She pointed to the scattered pieces of Calith's armor. Your champion built a weapon bonded to his nervous system. A perfect fusion of biology and technology that he believed was invincible. And he was almost right. No force in the galaxy could break through that armor from the outside. She paused and smiled slightly. But I am a scientist. And scientists do not think about problems the way warriors do. I did not look at his armor and ask how I could break it. I looked at his armor and asked how it worked. And then I asked what would happen if someone simply talked to it. Murmur ran through the crowd as her meaning became clear. His armor was designed to amplify his neural signals, so I gave it a signal to amplify. Not a command but chaos, not control but confusion. And his perfect weapon became his greatest vulnerability. She lowered her hand and looked directly at the Dravani delegation. You did not lose today because you were weak. Commander Calith is one of the finest warriors I have ever seen. You lost because you were blind. Because you saw our limitations and assumed they were our whole story. Her gaze moved across the crowd, meeting eyes of every color and shape. Humans do not endure despite our fragility. We endure because of it. Every limitation forced us to think harder, to adapt faster, to find solutions that other species never needed to imagine. She took a deep breath. So yes, our bones break more easily than yours. But that taught us to build shields and armor and machines that could protect us. Yes, our muscles are weak. But that taught us to use tools and leverage and technology to multiply our strength. Her voice rose, filling the arena with a power that had nothing to do with volume. Yes, our lives are short, but that taught us to value every moment. To pass knowledge from generation to generation. To build civilizations that would outlast any single individual. We are not strong despite being weak. We are strong because we learned to turn our weaknesses into weapons. She let the silence stretch for a moment. Before continuing, I did not come here to prove that humans are dangerous. I came here to prove that underestimating us is dangerous. We do not want war with the Dravani or anyone else. We want trade and cooperation and the chance to contribute to something greater than ourselves. She looked directly into the camera drones floating around her. But make no mistake. If anyone tries to take what is ours, if anyone assumes that our soft bodies mean soft spirits, they will learn the same lesson that Commander Calith learned today. She dropped her hand to her side. We are the children of a death world. We have been fighting impossible odds since before we could write our own history. And we have never once stopped finding ways to win. She turned and began walking toward the exit. The Kepler corridor is ours. Not because we took it by force, but because we earned it. We earned it by refusing to accept that we could not have it. By finding a way when everyone told us there was no way. She paused at the edge of the arena and looked back one final time. That is what it means to be human. Then she walked through the doorway and disappeared from view. The arena remained silent for several long moments, and then slowly, one by one, the alien delegates began to rise from their seats. The Galactic Council ruled in humanity's favor within the hour, granting full control of the Kepler corridor to Earth's government. But more importantly, something shifted in the way the galaxy saw the small soft beings from the third planet of an unremarkable star intelligence agencies across 1,000 worlds. Updated their files, adding new assessments and warnings that their predecessors had never considered. Necessary threat level. Revise immediately combat capability. Do not engage without overwhelming force. Strategic assessment. Humans do not fight like prey. They fight like something that learned to kill predators with their bare hands and never forgot how on Earth. Elena Vasquez returned to her quiet life as a xenobiologist, refusing offers of fame and political power with the same calm certainty she had shown in the arena. She went back to studying alien species, Learning their secrets, understanding their strengths and weaknesses, her daughter Maria visited her often, and they would sit together and watch the stars, talking about everything and nothing. And sometimes, when the night was dark and the universe felt very large, Maria would ask her mother to tell the story again. The story of the day a human woman faced a giant in invincible armor and taught the entire galaxy a lesson they would never forget.